Okay, the next item to be evaluated on our management practices is mechanical. Occasionally we need to utilize some mechanical practices to help conserve soil and or water on this site. Those mechanical practices listed on your card are controlling brush or trees, farming on the contour, using divided slopes or strips, constructing level terraces, installing drainage systems, installing grass waterways or diversions, and or, if none of those apply, no mechanical treatment is needed. So what I'd like to do at this time is to discuss briefly each of those criteria and when they might be used or when they should be checked off on this particular card. And the discussion of these factors takes place on page 24 in your manual. So on page 24, under control brush or trees, let me give you an example of how this might work. We've got a site, it's about class 5 or 6 land, class 6 land, let's say, and on this site we have a stand of grass. But within that grass stand we have some undesirable woody species. That could be hawthorn, could be wild rose, could be evergreen blackberry, those types of species that would detract from the overall usefulness of that site for grazing. Well, that is when we would want to check item number 14, controlling brush or trees, either with mechanical or chemical treatment. Because that controlling those would allow a greater carrying capacity at that site, or if we were going to utilize this for woodlot or timber production, it would allow more wood or timber to be produced on that site. So we are going to be seeing this used most often on grazing sites and or woodlot sites. Items number 15 and 16, farm on the contour or cross slope and use divided slopes or strips. Those are applicable to cultivated sites. So we're looking at class 1 through 4 land where we're cultivating. And if we look at the descriptions here in our manual on page 24, farming on the contour or cross slope, conduct farming operations on the contour or cross slope at right angles to the slope direction. That's pretty much an automatic on classes, on all cultivated cropland, class 2, 3, and 4. On using divided slopes or strips, that would be applicable on cultivated land in classes 2 through 4 with slopes above 3% or 2% non-irrigated, 3% non-irrigated and 2% irrigated. So the divided slopes or strips. Now, when we do this as a part of the field exercise that was demonstrated for you on the laboratory tape, it's not practical to divide slopes if they're not long enough to divide. And what I mean by that is that we have to have a certain length of slope, usually 100 meters or greater, or it really is not practical to divide that slope. And what we mean by dividing it is we're putting it into 2 different types of tillage or farming practices at the same time. The purpose of that is so that we never have the entire length of that slope exposed or bare soil at any one point in time. This, of course, reduces the potential for runoff and erosion if we at least have a portion of that slope covered with either stubble or growing vegetation, either one. The item on constructing terraces. Terracing is a technique that is used to trap or impound water if they're level terraces, or if they're gradient terraces, it's designed to trap the water long enough and then control or channel the flow out of the field if the rate at which the water is being coming down is in excess of the intake rate. So we have these 2 types of terraces, but terracing really only applies on certain slopes of land. And if we look at our manual on page 24, it's telling us that they're used to catch or divert runoff water on classes 2 or 3 lands with less than 8% slope. If you go above 8% slope, terracing is very difficult because oftentimes the terraces will break during very intense storms, and actually you'll see an increase in soil loss by erosion because then you've greatly concentrated the flow of water into those areas of the field where the terraces have broken. So for the purpose of our exercise, we're only going to use terracing on cultivated cropland class 2 and 3, but less than 8% slope. The drainage system, that would be applicable if we saw incidents of a seasonably high water table, or if the site card told us that we had a seasonably high water table, then it might be practical to install a drainage system. So drainage systems that they're talking about here is where we use gated pipe or tile pipe that occurs underneath the surface of the soil. Of course, it has to be down below the level of the water table so that the water can move into that pipe, and then we are channeling that flow or directing that flow of water out of the field. What we're trying to do with drainage systems is to create enough depth of soil profile where it does not become restrictive to the growth of the roots for the plants that we're growing in that particular location. I think most of us have probably seen areas where tile drainage needed to be installed, in that during prolonged periods of time we had water impounded or standing on the surface of the soil. And those are obviously areas where drainage would allow that excess water to be removed from those soils and make them much more applicable for growing of crops. A grassed waterway or diversion, item number 19. If we're in a field and we are in what is called a concentrated flow area. By concentrated flow area, what I mean is this is an area where surrounding runoff is going to accumulate and move down through the field. So we're really talking about the bottom of a draw or bottom of an area, a low-lying area in the field where surrounding runoff is going to accumulate. As this accumulates, we get water moving out of the field, and with it, of course, oftentimes we get soil removed and we end up with ditches or gullies. Well, the purpose of a grass waterway, new conservation term that's being used today, they call these grass filter strips, because they're really, what they're designed to do is to slow down the movement of the water out of the field to where the soil remains behind. So the concept of a filter strip. We are filtering out the soil. We're not going to totally be able to prevent any water from coming out of that field, but at least we can slow it down to the point to where it's not removing the soil or causing these ditches or gullies to occur. If we are evaluating a site in a field where we are in a concentrated flow area, that is when we would check installing the grass waterway or diversions. Now, diversions are a little bit different. Those are actually areas where we trap or impound the water for a period of time. Sometimes we hear those referred to today as sediment basins. And there we are not only concentrating the flow, but we are trapping it or holding it in an area long enough to allow any soil to settle out. Item number 20, no mechanical treatment needed. This is only utilized if none of the factors 14 through 19 apply. So we would check number 20 if none of the items 14 through 19 above would apply for that site.